that's me. That's why I'm here. Someone just tried to say something.
And like I mentioned, people who got here a little while ago, huge kudos and thank you to Florian for filling in for me. I was going to be doing an online workshop, but I got assaulted on the TTC. So
I'm still like not sure what. I'm just imagining someone just karate chopping you out of your chair, basically.
no, I'll tell the story quickly. So the bus driver did nothing that he was supposed to do for wheelchair users, except deploying the ramp. And only after my insisting I was getting on his bus. That's a whole other thing. There's a human rights case coming. So I board I'm on the ramp, and
then the ramp went away.
on the ramp, right? Let alone on the ramp with me, and someone goes and whacks my back, and partially looked at my back, and apparently gave me whiplash according to my sports med doctor. So that's great.
Huh? It wasn't too far off with the karate chop.
No, it's like that. So yeah.
Like what? It's like it's the whole thing. You got karate kidded basically, but yeah, that sounds very unpleasant, and I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm glad I could step in. Marco, how's the recording going?
So I got it to work. Sound is coming through, so I'm started recording again.
Yep, sounds good.
Cool.
Okay, and I'll just start from there, I guess. Yeah, that works. Okay, just let me know when you've started it.
It's already recording about 2 minutes ago, so yeah, feel free to.
Look at you go! Look at you be fast. Even my little karate kid noises got in there. Lovely. Okay, fantastic.
Yes.
Okay.
Code of conduct.
Huh?
Marco's got to do the code of conduct thing.
Be
nice. Karate chop people.
Yeah. Do not be a kick.
Exactly. Thank you for the blip. As I cannot change my screen right now, I cannot paste the link on chat. So Liz, if you can do that, please, that will be great. But so to do the spiel, we are an official TorontoJS event. And as so, we need to follow the code of conduct. Our code of conduct, basically, it's be nice, respect people. And if you have any issues, please come talk to me or Liz. We will be the host for tonight, and we'll be able to help you. That's it.
Okay, sounds about right. That sounds great.
It's not an in-person event, but considering what's happened the last few weeks, I'm going to mention this again. Do not touch anyone's mobility aids randomly on the street or any disabled person without permission.
Yeah, it's funny. I wasn't sure if we were still going to be doing like the in-person, but I'd just be coming from a screen or something. Like I wasn't really sure what we were going to do. So I just sort of had all sorts of really fancy setups in my head, how that was going to work.
Yeah. So anyway, I thought I would do that PSA because apparently it's needed.
Apparently, yeah.
Apparently, yes. Anyway,
okay.
Thank you, Florian.
You're welcome. Shall I start?
Yes, please. Okay. I just gave you thumbs up and you did not see it. That's funny. My mom is blind. I know better.
Good job. All right. So, first, is this visible? The thing I'm holding in my hands?
Yes, it is. We can see from your second finger down.
Okay.
So
gonna type some characters here. This is a Braille display, and now it has characters on it.
Sure. If you move it down a bit, we'll be able to see it more.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go. So this is Braille display. It does Braille, and it does Braille in various ways. So right now, actually, I'm having to sort of MacGyver this a little bit because this is a very old Braille display. This is a Braille display from 2014. So it uses micro USB, which I have pretty much banned from my house at this point. So I had to find like the last micro USB cable I still had, and apparently it only does charge and not data. So I'm actually not able to use this with my computer, but I am able to use the internal programs. So I can still show stuff off, just not quite as convenient as I normally would. So I'm just going to hold this up, and I'm going to talk about some of the controls on here. Basically, this is a bar of Braille. It shows 40 characters of Braille at a time. Every cell is one character. Every character is generally analogous to either one or a few English letters in the English alphabet. We'll get to that in a second. Now, these Braille displays come in various forms. Like this is one that literally is just a Braille display. And it has these controls on here. These are there's 4 controls up here, and then there is 4 up here. That might be out of view, but there's 4 of them here too. Those are what we call the Braille keys, and you can actually type with those. So if I were to type like this, A, B, B, A, B, it's kind of hard to type with only one hand. But as you can probably tell, like as I'm typing those letters, like they're coming up on display here, and there's this little bit here that just moves along the line. That's a cursor. So basically, what the Braille display does is various things. It shows Braille, obviously. It lets you type Braille if you are so inclined. And it essentially shows you where your cursor is, which is really helpful sometimes. So it does that in 2 ways. Basically, there's the display mode, and then there's the, I think they call it note taker mode. Let me put this down because my arm is getting numb. They call it note taker mode. Note taker mode is basically what I'm showing off now, and it sort of allows the Braille display to become basically its own little computer-ish thing where you can have a word processor and a book reader and a couple of other things. Usually there's some flash storage in here that you can stick some text files in. And you can use that as just a little, like, notebook, literal note taker. If you don't have a computer handy or you don't want to connect it to your phone or anything of the sort, you just sort of go ham on these keys here. And you can literally just type various letters like hello. I have not done this in forever. My name is Florian. And this mechanism that I just used, like right now you can only see the last bit of what I typed because there's only 40 characters. So when you get to the end of the line, it just sort of scrolls to the next line. And you can use keys on the Braille to scroll back. That's what certain keys do. And then there's space bars, and then there is system keys that do all sorts of fancy internal operating system things. And this connects to a bunch of different things. So it like I said, we're now showing off just what it can do on its own. So a word processor, calculator, alarm clock, whatever you want. It's basically a little PDA based in a Braille display. And it lets you type and read. And that can be enough for a lot of things. If you just want a place to store, say, passwords, given nobody else speaks Braille in your vicinity, you could use it for that. You could literally have like little encrypted storage for security keys and such like that, things of that nature. And obviously, if someone were to get physical access to it, you would be able to just get those files off the storage and then read them anyway. But let's just not hope that happens. So that's what it does on its own. Like it can read books, it can store files, it can store notes. But obviously, it also has this display mode where basically it connects to stuff. Now, again, this is 10 years old, so the Bluetooth standard is woefully out of date. I actually tried connecting this over Bluetooth, and my computer is just not having it. It is just too old. I think it's like Bluetooth version 2 or something, and it should be backwards compatible, but apparently it just isn't. So normally I have my other display that actually has a keyboard built in. For the people who were here last time, I showed that off as well. That one's in the shop. It's being fixed right now, so I have to use this one for the moment, which is fine. We can make it work. So in that mode, in a Braille display mode, it basically becomes an input and output device for various things. It can connect to phones, it can connect to computers, it can connect to various operating systems. I've seen it work with Mac OS, with Windows, even with Linux if you set it up correctly, Android, iOS, all things. I'm trying to think, have I seen it work with Nokia phones? No, I don't think so. But that same sort of principle applies. You can read stuff, but you can also, if you don't want to use the keyboard on your display or your laptop for whatever reason, you can use these. They call them Perkins keys after the Perkins Brailler. You can use those to control your computer up to a point. Like you have controls. I think you have Control and Alt maybe in the emulation modes, and then you have your letters for hotkeys, so you can do some but not all hotkeys. really what's been happening over the last 10 years is that we've been given more buttons. So if you do want to control your entire computer from your Braille display, you can do that a lot easier now, culminating in what I showed off last time, which is basically just a laptop keyboard with a Braille display built in, where you just have that to control your whatever is connected to it, which I pretty much use to control my entire house. I mean, that's how I talk to my like Android phone. That's how I talk to my Windows computers, my Macs, all the things. And then I have some kind of audio fuckery going on to make sure that going on to make sure that I can hear all those machines like speaking as well. The last thing that I haven't shown off yet with the Braille display, what it does is basically it has these keys at the top here, the row of little pip buttons, I'd almost say. That's actually a mouse of sorts. Like you can use that to click above the character you're reading, and that will make your cursor move. And sometimes that can be really helpful for working with certain UIs. Like you click it, basically how a mouse works as well. Obviously, it's just a lot more limited because you can only see one line at a time. Now, as you can see, Braille characters are pretty big. This is one letter. This like cluster of 3 dots is one letter. That's an O. And for that reason, a lot of Braille tables, and we'll get into that in a second, a lot of Braille tables have contractions, which basically are letter combinations that you see very often have been sort of unified into a single character. I think in English that could be TION at the end of a word, or AR in the middle of a word, or a bunch of other ones. Honestly, I don't know them very well because in the Netherlands, in the Dutch Braille table, which is a different Braille table to the English one, we don't have contractions that much. They tried them in the 80s and just no one really used them, so they just did away with them again, which essentially means that I have been like severely hampered in my Braille speed. I have learned to read character by character really fast, and I can use that to do streams, and I do it all the time. But I could probably have learned to read a lot faster, and I'm actually working on getting that speed bump even faster, because Braille is what I use for various different things. And we're going to show off some of the things that I do with Braille as we go. Now, the tricky bit is obviously that I don't actually have Braille on my computer currently, so I'm going to have to simulate and sort of orchestrate this, which I can do. I'm pretty good at that. But what we're going to essentially do is look at a couple of solutions where Braille would be helpful or is helpful in various ways. Now, if you do want to learn about Braille yourself, if you want to learn it for whatever reason, there is a really cool training program at uebonline.org. I forget if there's dashes in that. If someone wants to Google, be my guest. But that is a training program. Training program that lets you essentially learn anywhere from like complete zilch ABCs to contractions, all the way down to like mathematical equations and how those work in Braille. So that is pretty fascinating. Obviously, you're learning UEB, which is the Unified English Braille Code. Braille is not a unified homogeneous language that's the same everywhere. Like I said, Dutch has a different Braille table, which mostly means that, for example, punctuation looks a little different. Contractions might be different if they exist at all. Math and music might be handled differently. Music in Braille is completely linear, which to me makes it kind of pointless, but hey, that's me. I have perfect pitch. I can say that and be fine. And then if you have different alphabets, the Braille may or may not be very different. Like if you look at Greek Braille, for example, that is relatively similar to Latin Braille, to just regular old English Braille, as it were. I believe the Greek characters have like a single dot below their Latin equivalent. So alpha would be an A with a dot below, and beta would be a B with a dot below, and things of that nature. Obviously, there's a couple characters that just don't have an equivalent. I believe eta, or I guess that would be eta now, is has a different character that they picked for it. So there's a number of different ones, and then you can go all the way down to things like Korean, Japanese, and Chinese, various dialects of Chinese that just have a completely different setup. Braille has a pretty logical flow. It's kind of hard to show off on camera. I'd have to find a Braille font and do it there. But really, what you see is that if you type the letters A to J in like Braille, and then you do the letters K to T, you'll find that literally that is the exact same number of characters with one dot below it. So if you know A, you know K, because K is just A with a dot 3 below it. And dot 3, the dots work like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's 3 columns of 3 rows of 2 or 2 columns of 3, depending on how your mind map works. So dot 1 is top left, dot 3 is bottom left, dot 4 is top right, and dot 6 is bottom right for the for people who need the audio description. So A is top left, K is top left and bottom left, B is top left, middle left, and L is top left, middle left, bottom left. And that's all the way down to T. You just get literally the same character with one bottom left dot below it, and now you have learned 20 characters. This is how Latin Braille works. It's pretty fantastic. I did not know this learning Braille. Like, this is something that someone pointed out to me like literally 20 years after I started learning it. And I had no idea that that's how it worked. That's just not how we learned it. We just learned, you learn your A, you learn your B, you learn your E or D, and then you learn start like short little words. And you just you learn letters one by one, and you just, if you never get this pointed out to you, you can go your entire life not knowing that that is how Braille functions. In, say, Japanese, what they've done is they have taken half of the Braille cell for the vowel, because Japanese writes in syllabaries. It's not A, B, C, D, E. It's asa, ka, ra, na instead. So they take half of the cell for the consonant and half of the cell for the vowel. So what really happens, and this is a bit of a mind bender, as it were, you'll see characters that because you can only make so many characters with 6 dots, and then they mean something completely different because just the way the makeup has been done is just so much different that you now have just letters that as, for example, UK, except now they're not UK anymore. They are actually Hana, which is really funny, because that's just one of those, you need to sort of context switch and have characters mean different things. And that happens in Braille a lot anyway. For example, numbers, the way you do digits in Braille are basically A to 0. One is A to 0, A to J is 1 to 0. You just stick a little number sign in front of it that indicates the next bit is a number, not letters. And that's what, changes age to 175.
Florian, and anyone else who's listening and not reading comments, I did pop in a Braille chart link.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
So it's the basic, just so you know, Florian, it's the basic Braille alphabet, goes A to J, then K to T, U to Z, and then across the bottom, it's got the capital sign, number sign, period, comma, question mark, semicolon, exclamation point, opening and closing quote.
Right. So you can see on that chart what I just said. Basically, A to J are the primitives, and then you add 1 dot and then 2 dots to make the other letters. And on a chart, that's actually really easy to see. If you start looking at those characters, you'll see the dots have been sort of juxtaposed in that particular way. So yeah, I'm not looking at comments. I don't think I can even see them if I'm not literally in the tab. So it's good that you mentioned that. So yeah, why would you want to add contractions to this? Like there's I think there's 2 schools of thought here about Braille. Like, unfortunately, Braille is one of those things that people start finding obsolete and unnecessary. I am very much disagreeing with that statement. Particularly digitally, Braille is a really helpful thing for a lot of reasons. It's actually really helpful to see how to spell certain words, because if you have contractions that always spell out the same characters, you can really just look at a word in sort of one glance and see how it's meant to be spelled, which particularly in English, where spelling rules are non-existent, that might be really helpful. if you don't have Braille, what happens to a lot of people like who have just always only used speech is that because English's spelling rules are non-existent, people spell things wrong like willy-nilly. It's just a thing that happens all the time. You get things like speech being SPEACH and things of that nature because it makes perfect sense. If you type that in, your TTS will tell you that it says speech, and if the TTS says it's right, then it must be right. Except there's a lot of languages where that just doesn't work the way you'd think it does, and English is one of them. So yeah, that's what Braille really, really shines, I think. I also rather like reading Braille books. Now, Braille books are ginormous. If we take a common book, if everyone has, if you've seen Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, the 5th book, that in Dutch Braille is 35 Braille volumes, and a Braille volume is about as thick as a half a phone book, I would say. So take that on a holiday to the Alps. It's one reason why we have contractions. If you want another example, the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy by Tolkien is 71 Braille volumes, double the Harry Potter one. So that's 71 Braille books that are all like 80 pages long or so, and they all sort of encompass one book series. So if you've just read, say, volume 21, and now you need to read volume 22. Good luck finding it if you haven't like stacked them up right, because it's going to be a mess to find. This was half of my holidays growing up. I would have just a whole bunch of Braille books with me and sit on the beach, and I just sort of read Braille books. And when you read them, you just sort of had to hold on to them. You didn't really send them back a lot of the time, so that was an awful lot of paper like being used. And because Dutch doesn't have contractions, every character was spelled out in the size that you saw on this Braille display. Like paper Braille is just about as large as regular Braille is. So that counts up pretty quickly. It's a lot of Braille. It's a lot of paper. It's a lot of books. So it makes sense that they're using contractions. Go.
On that case, having a Braille display definitely helps. It's like
yes,
even better than having a Kindle. Like I like reading big books, and sometimes my hand hurts of just having the books around. Having a digital reader definitely helps. I think a Braille reader will help even more in that case.
It really does. Yeah, back in 2015 when I got a Braille display for the first time that was able to read books, that was just a very, very big change for me, because I could just load it up with a whole bunch of books and I just carried that one thing around and it worked fine, and that was great. They are working on like providing Braille readers by various like Braille libraries at this point. They're very like sort of dumbed down feature stripped Braille displays, I believe. I want to say they're multi-line, but I don't remember if that's actually true. Because obviously when you read a book, what you have to do a lot is you have to pan and scroll around, because you only have one real line to work with. So some Braille displays will let you auto scroll, so they just every so many seconds scroll the thing one line forward. So based on how fast you read, you can sort of have it be a thing where it sort of scrolls below your fingers as you're reading it. And then some are really smart, and they can tell with like touch sensors when you're at the end of the line, and they'll scroll it for you when you do. But yeah, if you don't have those little gimmicks, all you can really do is press the button, the scroll forward button, to read the next line, which can get a little RSI intensive if you do it a lot. I can see how that might be tricky for some people.
Does it get tiresome? Like, do your fingers get sore from like writing a lot?
A little bit. Like if I've read Braille the entire day, I will have to take a break. Generally, what I do for that reason is I use Braille in conjunction with something else. Obviously, when you're using Braille to read books, you can't do that. But if you're using it as a computer thing, it's more of a secondary thing that I use for really specific things. And we're going to go into that in just a little bit. But Braille is really a secondary modality for the same information the NVDA, the screen reader, is also providing. So that's something you either get very quick at or just you don't bother. A lot of people don't use Braille with their computer because they feel it just slows them down. For me, it speeds it up. because I've just grown up using it a lot. And the way I used it, I had a Braille display, a very chunky one, back in the that would have been the late 90s, 1998, 1999. And it was called an Optelec Braille Voyager. It was this big old chunky Braille display that had like a foldable lid. And if you folded that outwards, it just had enough room to put a keyboard on. So you essentially couldn't have a unit. Kind of what I've done now, where like my Braille display is in front of my keyboard. Not sure how visible that is, but that's how I've done it now. And I used to be on my parents' computer, and I would play games that way. Like there were text-based games that I would practically play completely with Braille because speech wasn't able to read the contents properly. That was a thing that happened back then. It's not as common now, but at the time, Braille had a very clear idea in text windows like that. Like you were at the bottom, and you could use your Braille keys to really easily get places that speech had a harder time getting to, which was really cool. And I'm honestly sad that that's not really a thing anymore. But that used to be a thing that you could do. You could have your cursor and your speech focus, as it were, be somewhere, and you could also sort of explore the window with Braille, and you were able to sort of just map where everything was on the screen, and you could use those cursor routing, these little pips that I showed, to click things. So NVDA has this concept of various cursors, so does JAWS. VoiceOver has this less, but it is a thing. If you dig deep enough, there is advanced ways of doing the same thing, where you can essentially disconnect cursors from one another and like have different places of focus. And really what I did with Braille when I was a kid was do that a lot. And I would type in places, I would also read in different places. And that's how I played, for example, something called MUDs, multi-user dungeons, which are basically text adventures, except it's online and there's multiple people at the same time playing them. And that got me really fast with Braille. I used Braille a lot for that because, like I said, speech just couldn't easily get there. It was just easier to do it with Braille. And that was my little monitor into the world. That's how I use Windows 98, Windows XP, Windows 7 up to a point. And to me, it just really added something that I didn't have with speech. And a lot of people don't really have that experience, particularly when they pick it up later in life. Braille display will always be a lot more secondary to those people than it is for me. But yeah, what does Braille provide that speech doesn't? Mainly, it provides me with selectivity in what I want to read. So, for example, if I'm doing code, let's actually let's get VS Code in here, and maybe we can show some stuff off here. Visual Studio Code. Like accessibility in that sense is a really interesting beast because some things might be really helpful in Braille and some things really aren't. I quite like, for example, in command line apps, when you get, let's just make a text file here. When you get one of these command line tools that's like showing you a progress bar where something is, you have like two brackets and then there's like vertical bars that are filling up the two brackets. I actually kind of like that because it usually looks really cool in Braille. It actually shows me very clearly what's happening in the progress bar, how much of the percentage is already done, how far the bar is already filled. It's a really quick thing that I can just see in Braille because I can see that without, for lack of a better word, I can touch it and I can sort of measure it with my fingers and see immediately what they're trying to show me. Whereas in speech, everything is serialized, so you have to listen to left paren bar right paren, and you don't actually know how many spaces are there as well, and it's really annoying for speech users. So it's one of those accessibility things where I have to canonically say don't do that because it's really distracting for people, but it's always a little because I actually kind of like those. So usually what I suggest is just make it configurable, like do either a number-based progress bar or just be able to turn this off at least. But yeah, some of that stuff is just really fun, and sometimes it can actually be helpful to just have that spin around on the Braille display, like the whole vertical bar / dash thing that NPM likes to do, or at least used to. I'm not sure if it still does it, but that I like that. It showed me that something was still happening. I didn't have to have my speech going to see that it was still doing stuff. So it's one of those weird like things where you get some extra like spatial stuff that you'd normally not be able to do, and I think that also shows up a lot in code as well as in mathematics. If someone tells me like 2 5/4 times x to the power of 54, I've already lost you. I don't know what you said first. I've already like completely gotten lost in math soup. And if I look at it in Braille, I can just sort of see the characters, for lack of a better term. Again, I just put my hands on there and like, okay, this is a 2, this is an x, this is to the second power. I can see the 2x still there. I can literally just move my hand backwards and see that again. So I can parse that mathematical equation a lot more simply than by just listening to it. And I was doing an SNHU course, a Sophia learning course the other week where they literally wrote out all the things. So literally the word to the second power was like written out. And I died a little bit inside. It took so much Braille space and it just did not help me. And that's one of those things. Like people usually like that's actually how most people in the US do math. Like that's how they learn to do it. And that's apparently how a lot of transcribers are also told to write it down. There's like a whole book that teaches them how to do that. And we just never had that here. We had Braille. We had some really fandangled, strange Dutch math notation in Braille. And that wasn't great either because that used really strange characters for things. Like you had all sorts of tildes and backslashes in your formulas to indicate that certain things were done or not done anymore because you don't have that spatial like put one thing above and one thing below a line because you can only see one line at a time on Braille. So they had to figure something else out to sort of designate what was one part of the formula and what was another part of the formula. And the tricky bit was that I'd really pretty much just already been doing that in my head. Like, at some point you just know where the brackets go in JavaScript or various other things, and you don't really need to be told that the brackets are actually there unless you're looking for them. And yeah, they had really explicit ways of doing that, which makes sense because math needs to be precise, but it also just really slowed me down and distracted me. So it's one of those weird, a great example of how accessibility can be extremely individual and just really different for different amounts of people. Like I like Braille. Some people really don't like Braille. Some people don't even read Braille that are blind. I'd say a lot of people who are blind don't read Braille. And that has all sorts of reasons as well. Like in the US, it's a lot harder to get a Braille display paid for than it is over here. Over here, they never really give you a lot of trouble with that. If you want like top of the line, with all the fancy bells and whistles, then yes, definitely you'll have to justify that. But if you just want something to read your stuff with, you can get that through like a healthcare request. Like they will literally just give you that. They will not care. Like you can only have one every X years. I think every 5 years. But that's just considered a living aid. You can just get that, send in a form. 3 weeks later, you have your Braille display, and that is very rare. Like if you look at different places, that just doesn't happen like that. So let me just put VS Code on the screen real quick and give you some speech here as well. Like I've been going for a while, and I don't want to ramble on here for too long. Get out.
And Florian, I put some more resources.
Okay.
An article by Braille Literacy Canada, learn more about Braille. So it's got a little bit more into the notation.
Nice.
For anyone who wants to incredibly geek out, math notation used in the Netherlands, quick fix or lasting solution. It's an academic PDF article.
It's a mess. I was actually working with there was one person, Annemieke van Leendert, who was doing their PhD on that, and they were helping me because they were like working for the blind school, and they were also sort of tutoring me in math. So I was being taught the Braille notation by someone who was really, really working hard on actually getting that Braille notation adopted. And it was a really interesting thing. Like they did a lot of research on like how do blind people read math? Like what hand reads what part of it? To what degree does comprehension suffer if we do it certain ways over certain other ways? There's a whole entire thing about it. So it's a really, really fascinating topic. But yeah, that's really what it all is. Like Braille is a really fascinating topic, and there's a lot of things to learn about it, like up to and including the different notations. and contractions and how they work and when they don't work. It's very fun, and it also sort of shows up in mainstream technology bit by bit. For example, on iPhones, up on Android phones as well, but iPhones did a little bit more with it. On iPhones, you have this thing called Braille screen input, which literally has you sort of flip your phone on its side, so your like your ring finger, middle finger, and pointer finger are sort of pointing at the screen, and your pinky and thumbs are stabilizing the phone, and it actually lets you tap in Braille characters so you can type without having to actually look at the keyboard. I find it an extremely awkward way of working. Sometimes it's actually really helpful if I'm sitting down somewhere and I have both my hands free. But obviously, you do need both of your hands free, and you need to be relatively stable, or you'll just yeet your phone right across the bus or whatever you're in. So it's helpful if you're not going to move anywhere, but it's also not helpful for all situations. But yeah, we're seeing it in places. Braille is definitely sort of on the decline, I think. A lot of people just don't think it's necessary anymore with all the TTS things that we have. But it's not quite dead yet, and people are still trying to innovate with it, which I'm very happy about, because it does actually make a lot of things a lot easier. Let me see if I'm allowed to present. Yeah, I am. So let me... Yep.
One question. You were saying not many people were using Braille nowadays, and yeah, with TTS and everything, that's understandable. But what other alternatives there are, like to Braille and TTS? I mean,
not much. Some people learn to read print letters that are just tactile and they can touch them. I believe in the US in schools this is pretty common. We don't learn this in the Netherlands, not really. Like if you want to learn the letters, you do that yourself. So I guess an alternative could be you just sort of make sure that you have all your letters very, very tactile, just really like deeply embossed or stamped into the paper. That could be a way to do it.
Like going way backwards.
Depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
Like it depends if you're in the clique that says I want equal access to everything and I want to do the exact same way as everybody else does it, then no, not necessarily. But actually making those versions, I don't know, it might be easier. Like if you have a dot matrix printer, which really is what a Braille printer is, they just use a different font and different like print heads. But presumably if you use a dot matrix printer that just punches holes into the paper, you could probably make it work somehow. It's a very different skill. Like these letters, like I said, are way smaller than Braille characters generally are. So like for me, it sort of just blurs together. Like I can't really read them very well. Sometimes I challenge myself by like looking at like letters melted into like glass drink bottles, for example, because those are pretty large and easy to feel. So I might think, okay, I think this is an O, this might be an N, but it's it's not something that a lot of people really do much with. I think like most of the time it's just Braille or TTS and technology. Like if you have to read something, you use your phone to make a picture of it, rather than like get a Braille version of it, which makes sense. It's a lot quicker, and you don't have the dependence on another person. But if you have a Braille display, you can have that extra digital modality to basically have that going on. I was gonna. Oh yeah, here we go.
yeah, it's complementary. So one thing complements the other. It's not mutually exclusive.
Not for me. Like I'm sure, for example, if you're deafblind, you don't really hear TTS, so you have to use only Braille. And for them, having Braille just crash out on you is really, really annoying. For example, a lot of people don't use Braille displays with their phones because phones have a bit of an annoying habit to disconnect without people wanting them to. So if if your screen locks after a couple of minutes, some battery saver function kicks in, and then when you try to get your phone to work again, the Braille doesn't properly connect up again. And when when you can hear the phone, that's not really an issue. It's fine. You can still work it out and just make it work again. But if you're fully deafblind, if you can't hear and can't see, you need that stuff to work reliably. And a lot of the time it just doesn't, which is kind of sad. I think I just got an error. Did I share something?
No.
Uh-oh. There is an error occurred while trying to share the screen. Please try again later. Okay. I'll try one more time. If it doesn't work, we'll just, say that we did. Okay. Let's see.
Is OBS still running and conflicting with something?
Shouldn't be. No, I have that off. Otherwise, you wouldn't have my camera either. I'll try it again. Maybe just waited too long or something. I want to share a window, and I want to share. Hey.
Yay!
It worked that time. No idea why it didn't work the last time, but here we go.
Oh,
So
nice
let me.
contrast.
Huh?
Nice contrast.
Thank you.
And I'm having a blurry vision day, so very nice contrast.
Oh, that's good. Let me cough. There we go. Sometimes that just needs to happen. This is VS Code. We're in a empty text file, and I'm gonna show. Let me just send my speech on through as well. Whoa.
Rate 30. Land.
So this is just an empty file. If I type, a whole bunch of things, this is a test. If I just copy paste that a bunch of times.
GitHub heading level 2 GitHub Copilot suggestions.
Leave.
No next form 0 suggestions. 0 heading level.
Okay, no idea why it's showing me that.
GitHub Copilot suggestions for Untitled 0 heading level 2 GitHub. T is as a test. T is as a test. Land. T is as a test. Land. T is as a test. Land. Paste. Land. T is land. T is as a test. T is as a test. T is as a test. Selected.
So I'm using it says T is a test because I put the capital on the H as well. It's a little thing. But one thing that's hard to do with just speech, let me just paste this a few more times just because I can.
T is as a test. Language markdown was automatically detected.
Shush. What if I want to make sure, what if I want to check if any of these maybe say this is a pest? Like if I want to check if any of them will say that I have to pretty much listen to all these all the way through.
T is a test. Land. T is as a test.
This is a test.
Land. T is as a test.
Land. This
is
a test. So with speech, that is really annoying because let me just turn it off for a sec so it doesn't talk over me.
Speech mode off.
With speech, I have to constantly listen to this is a test, this is a test, this is a test, this is a test, this is a test until the universe heat death. And if you have Braille, you can literally just turn speech right off. Put your finger on the T, this is a test, because that's always going to show up at the same spot. And now I can just hit the down arrow key and just look at just that one single letter. I can keep my finger there because it's going to refresh under my finger. And I can just scroll down. I can just see, is there any pests or is it just all the way tests? That is a really stupid, simple, contrived example. But if you do that with speech, it takes you forever to find. If you do it that way, what you could do is you would Control F for the word pest and then see if that works. But you don't have a quick way to just go down a column like that with speech, not easily. And that becomes even more important when, for example, you're looking at log files that, for example, will start with a date timestamp. So you get, instead of knowing what your error is, you get 2024-09-13, 13:54, T, I don't know, so many seconds, so-and-so file name, maybe in this and this line, and then it says error, and then only then you get to the error bit. You can't skip ahead with speech. You can't just arbitrarily decide you don't want to hear all that stuff. You have to listen to the entire line all the way through to get to your requested content. With Braille, while it's just yabbering on, just losing its tiny little mind, you can just scroll down to the end of the line and see what it's actually going to say before it says it. And at that point, you can work a lot faster. And that's what I mean with like a secondary modality. Like it's not going to be your primary way because speech is just faster. It talks a lot faster than you can read Braille. That's just always going to be a thing for most, if not all people. Like maybe there's people that are really, really fast Braille readers. I consider myself pretty fast. By pretty fast, I mean I can read and speak at the same time, pretty much read things off the screen with very few interruptions, that is already pretty hard for some people to do. Like they just can't quite keep up that flow of reading and immediately speaking. I can do that. I'm one of the happy ones that can do that. But that's considered pretty fast. Like speech, you've heard it. It goes a lot faster than I can even speak. It can go for some people up to like 800, 900 words per minute. That is 1.5 words per second. That's not, I have tried lightning talks once or twice, and I'm okay at that, but I can't speed rep. So even with all that speed, though, you're gonna have to like wade through all the sludge sometimes and get all that stuff you don't want to hear. Log files with things. For example, say you're looking for your brace matching. You're making sure that one brace has like a matching brace. In some code styles, the braces are at the end of the line, not on their own line. So by definition, you then have to listen to the entire line of code, which may be super stupid long if you're working in Lisp or JavaScript. But you just get like 15 callbacks, like all nested within each other, and good luck finding all the braces. It's just not fun to have to listen to that because it's like left paren, right paren, left brace, right brace. Maybe there's some brackets in there somewhere, and it takes forever. With Braille, you can just literally sort of predict where the braces are going to show up. You could either turn speech off or just let it speak and just not listen to it, and you can just sort of keep your fingers on those places on the Braille display, scroll down and see if all the braces are where they need to be. And I'm sure you can ask AI to do this for you now, but if you don't want to use AI, you don't like AI, or if you just don't have AI, this is how you can very efficiently brace match or tag match if you're doing HTML, because that can get really fun too. Like, is this the one div or the other div? Like, there's 15 nested divs in here. Also, if you have 15 nested divs, you're doing something wrong. Anyway, and I'm almost done. I'm pretty sure we're coming towards the end of our time
Speed well,
here.
58
Yeah,
AM.
it's 58.
Speech
So
mode off.
at 1, we'll switch over to questions. I believe to go a little bit longer because we did start a little bit later, but I'll just keep on yammering. Basically, that's how you would do braces, brackets, and tags. And that way you don't have to listen to code that much. Like, that's what I said. You can turn punctuation in the speech all the way down, so you just get the really important ones. And when you do that, you start learning how to pattern match. You basically just know, okay, this is a function call, so there's going to be there's going to be parentheses that have the arguments in them, and then usually because of this code style, there's going to be a left brace right behind it. So you can sort of fill in like the rest of the thing all the way to the end of the line when you just hear like a function name. And you don't even have to look at that code or listen to it all the way through, because listening to code is very tedious. At least to me, I can't do it for very long. And I like to use Braille to sort of offset some of that tedium for me, so I can sort of just do two things at once, which is really helpful. A couple of other things I use Braille for: subtitles. If I'm really like doing language immersion, which I do a lot, sometimes if I just want to play with a foreign language and I just want to hear the foreign language and I don't want to be distracted by the speech telling me what the subtitles are, I find that I can compartmentalize a little bit easier if I have that in Braille. So I'll have my Braille on the subtitle ticker of, say, some Japanese show or some other thing, and I can just look at the subtitles as they zip by. I can read fast enough generally to be able to do that. And it gives me another modality to be able to listen to the show and not have to have speech jabbering in the background in order to read the subtitles properly, which can be pretty nice. And if you put all that stuff together, you just sort of develop a toolbox of tools to do things like coding. Like if I were to code, I would, for example, for the most part, probably turn my speech either off or only like have it read certain things. Like I'll quickly shut it up a lot of the time because I know what it's going to say. And that in conjunction with things like autocomplete and things like just knowing how a programming language or a framework works, you can get pretty good at just coding up a thing without knowing all the things. Like if I just do let's do HTML.
Language HTML was automatically detected and set as the language mode. Less HTML greater bullet untitled 1. Less HTML greater.
Like right
Land.
now, it didn't
Land.
say
Land.
anything.
Less HTML greater. Land.
But I would have halfway expected it to just put in the closing tag for me. Maybe if I do...
Less. Suggest list. / less HTML greater bullet untitled 1. AI content describer Visual Studio Code document. Less HTML greater bullet untitled 1. AI content describer Visual Studio Code document. Application. Main landmark. Less HTML greater bullet untitled 1. Editor as autocomplete multi-line. Less / HTML greater.
I'm literally just not doing anything right now. I'm letting it
space greater.
Yeah, and fill that in.
Less / HTML
so
greater.
We eventually got our / HTML, and that's another reason why we turn Braille off sometimes. And I want to close with that because it's a fun thing to think about. We don't have the visual context of knowing where we are within an application. So the screen reader has to do a lot of heavy lifting to basically tell you you're in the edit field, that's within the document, that's within the window, that's within this desktop area that you're on. And when the context changes, it has to keep telling you that. So what happened just now was NVDA doing exactly what the ARIA spec suggests. Like every time that context changes, give the new context. But because it switches so fast in VS Code with the auto suggestion coming up and then, something else focusing and this and that, it tells you the same thing 3 times in a row with a very, very, very slight difference sometimes, which is just spammy. You don't need that information. And it's one of those things that you can't really fix very easily because NVDA says, well, we're doing what the spec says, which is correct. And then VS Code says, well, we don't know how to fix this because it's an NVDA thing, which is also correct. And I think they've been going back and forth on that for several years now. It still hasn't been fixed. There used to be an add-on for it that would sort of suppress a lot of this unnecessary data, but it fell out of favor. No one's using it anymore, and it's not being developed anymore. So that's unfortunate. But another reason why you might want to not just hit the control key, the shut up key, and just look at your Braille display, because that'll also tell you a lot of these things, but it can only show you one thing at a time. So it should, with a little bit of luck, only show you the relevant bits. And you can just sort of predict where your cursor currently is. You don't have to hear that every single time. And that's really how it goes. Like if you know what you're going to see, you can now rely on the various things. Like for example, right now, we got a suggestion from Copilot that says head. And I can say, yeah, put that in.
Less HTML, less head greater.
And it didn't say anything when I pressed tab, but you just sort of learn to know, okay, it's probably going to do the thing
HTML
that
greater.
I'm expecting it to do. Right now, the AI doesn't know what I'm going to do, so I just put in a single head tag.
Less head greater.
And I'm assuming that if I were to do the less than /, it'll do a /head. Let's not even listen to it and see what it does.
Less head greater, less /head greater.
Exactly. So you can learn, you sort of predict what the prediction is going to do. And with a little bit of help from Braille and a little bit of help from speech that you sort of direct in a really specific way, you can get pretty fast at this stuff. And it's really how I've been able to do coding work for several years now. I don't do as much of it as I used to. I'm mostly accessibility auditor and consultant now, but I do it for coding. I do it for cybersecurity. I do it for all sorts of reasons. And Braille is a fun little extra superpower that I get to have. Let me have a look at the time one more time. We're at 1:04. Let's call it here and just have a Q&A at this point, because I've been yammering on for quite some time, and I can imagine there might be a lot of tangents people want to go down. So let's do that. Do people have questions?
Cool. So if you have questions, feel free to type them in chat. You can also put your hand up, which is the third icon over in the middle, or the second one. There you go. Thank you, Florian. I love the sound effects. Okay. Here, I'm going to get that open.
Okay, I have not been monitoring chat at all, so if people have been chattering there,
no.
All power to you, but I haven't been looking.
We just have one right now from Oleski.
Okay.
You do a lot of screen sharing. Is it possible to understand the screen layout on your computer? As I understand, it's possible on mobile devices by touchscreen.
It's a fun one. So I sometimes do screencasts as well, and it's always a whole entire thing to make sure that everything is visible where it needs to be. And I cannot generally do that by myself. No, I generally have someone come in and do it for me. There is ways to make that work. You said it already. Touchscreens can help sometimes because you can literally feel what windows are currently visible, but you can't see if they're overlapping. You can't see if there's an adequate amount of space between them. You can't really tell how big your font is and if that's big enough. You can't tell if like there's some kind of contrast clash going on, anything of the sort. So generally, I try to just not share my entire screen, but confine it to the window that I'm actually sharing. And even then, it may be wrong. I know, for example, that there's an update, a notification hanging out in this VS Code window that I haven't been able to just do anything with yet because I was talking. But no, it's generally not something that you're really aware of. I have an add-on that actually maximizes all my windows when I go into them, just to make sure that I, can use my mouse emulation if I need to, and everything is actually there visually. Because the screen reader doesn't care all that much about how much is actually visible on the screen. In that sense, it reads the APIs more than it reads the screen. And really only when you start clicking things or making a picture of the screen and getting text from that, something called OCR, that's when screen layout and what else is on your actual physical screen starts mattering. But on the whole, no, you generally have no idea what is where and how on the screen. You just know that it's somewhere.
And Marco had a question. Is there some sort of convention or formatting that you think would be, blurry vision, convention or formatting that you think would help for reading code in the screen reader?
I've had that question several times from several people, and I never really know how to answer it. I don't think so. I think most of the code style recommendations that you see in general are pretty good. Like, put your opening function brace either right below the line or on top of the line, and then, indent match it with the last line or whatever. I've seen a couple of people asking me about line lengths. Apparently, a lot of particularly older code style rules say to confine your line length to about 80 characters, or sometimes I see 120. I don't necessarily think that's all that important. This is a 40-cell Braille display. There's only 40 cells. I do have an 80-cell Braille display as well. Now I think about it, I should have probably used that one for this demonstration. Except if I were to put that one here, I would pretty squash the laptop that's under here right now because that thing is really heavy. But no, outside of that, like a variant of that I often get is there certain programming languages that work better with screen readers than others? And I'd have to say not really. You sort of learn to deal with whatever programming language you're working with. I guess if you don't like all the brackets and braces, you could do something like Ruby or Python, which still has them, but not quite as many of them. Particularly Ruby doesn't. They use a lot of do-end instead of braces, which sometimes can be easier. But it's really a matter of like personal taste, I think. I don't think there's necessarily a better or a good way to do things over a worse way to do things in that sense.
Just check to see if anyone has their hand up. I can't see everyone right now.
That's okay. I can't either.
Nice. So I went down the rabbit hole earlier this year with 8-dot Braille systems and all of that. Have you delved into that? And you want to explain it to the people that don't know Braille?
So yeah, what generally you see happen is that because you have 8-dot Braille, like instead of having like one cell, like one character take up 2 cells, sometimes you see this to, for example, indicate a context switch. What happens is instead of using more cells, they will drop certain Braille characters down a dot, so you can distinguish them that way. And particularly on computers and Braille display applications in general, your 7 and 8 dots are usually used for things like formatting indicators, or capital letters, or your cursor is usually the dots 7 and 8 that are blinking. So that's how you usually use them. Excuse me. That's how I usually use them. At least that's how I usually see them used. There are, I believe, 8-dot systems that do more with those lower dots. The thing is, a lot of physical Braillers just aren't equipped to use that stuff. So you really only see this digitally for like most of it, and then some people go nuts with it and do all sorts of interesting things. I believe there is a Japanese Braille system called Kantenji, which uses those like last two dots to do actual one-to-one kanji representations. And there's thousands of kanji, so that makes sense. But I don't believe it's all that much actually being used. I know it's being worked on, but I don't think any blind people actually use it. I think it's more of a theoretical, we could do it this way, and NVDA has a way to show it. And I've played with it once or twice, but that's about all I know about them. Generally, they're not super common like the 8-dot systems. They usually stick to the 6 ones, and then 8 and 7 become markers for various things.
Cool. Marco has some trivia and another question. Trivia. The line length is because old terminal screens can only display 80 characters per line, and that's stuck.
Yep,
Remember
that's true.
COBOL, it's around there. Yes, I did. Yes, I did a bit of COBOL. I got curious. Because it looked like a knitting pattern. For those who can't see, I'm knitting the neck of a sweater as we talk.
Fancy.
Yes. And sorry, the ding, that's my mom. Hi. My mom says hi.
Hello, Mom.
Another question for Marco. If you know, is there any ARIA standard or proposal that handles verbosity levels?
There is a couple of Braille only ARIA things. I think there's like ARIA Braille description and a couple of other ARIA Braille specific things that does help a bit. Verbosity levels, not so much. Like there are certain things you can turn off in the screen reader to not do certain ARIA things. ARIA Live is usually something you can actually turn off altogether, just to not go completely nuts if someone decided to stick a bunch of sliders on the home page that all show different products, but they don't actually tell you where they're from. So you just have a bunch of random information being tossed at you. Audible. But yeah, that's just a thing you can turn off. And then, like, I think the idea of having, for example, Braille description and things like that is so you can do what I do. So basically, just have something that makes more sense to just have in Braille as opposed to in speech. So you can put like a short little indicator on the Braille display, and then maybe have the speech say something longer. So yeah, not so much for verbosity levels that I'm aware of, but you are slowly starting to see more distinction between Braille and speech where that's concerned.
Yeah, so the question on verbosity is more to get the thing like VS Code says 3 times the same thing. And I'm thinking here as a very pragmatic approach, you would have a way to have different verbosity levels for things. So if you know the context you are in, you can say, okay, I don't want this extra fluff of information. It doesn't mean
Yeah,
anything.
you'd think that they would have added something like that, but no, not that I'm currently aware of, and I don't think that's being looked into either. So if you want to write up the spec, you can go to the ARIA spec. I think it's on GitHub, or at least it has call for speakers or call for proposals now and again. So I guess suggest it, because it can be a lot. Like this VS Code in particular is very chatty, and you see this too in like what we're seeing a lot in React applications is that there's not enough verbosity. So you'll click on a link and you just literally get nothing because technically the page hasn't reloaded. You just have like one part somewhere further down the page that did something, and now it's different. And you can see that, and if you go explore, you'll find it, but it doesn't actually poke the screen reader with anything. So that's like the other side of that coin, where like there's just not enough happening to actually trigger that reread of the entire page, which it's kind of funny. Like sometimes you get way too much, sometimes you get nothing at all. It's amusing.
Yeah, interesting.
We have another question, and I'm going to apologize. I'm going to mispronounce name. Pranav, Pranav. They read your free code camp article where you mentioned to use a Windows virtual machine on your Mac because VoiceOver is not perfect. This article was from 2018. Has anything changed in these 6 years? Is it any better now?
These articles follow me around everywhere. So has it gotten better? I wouldn't necessarily say that VoiceOver necessarily has gotten better, but people have stepped up to the plate to write a bunch of extra tooling that you can add to VoiceOver to add features that it normally wouldn't have. and that makes it more tolerable. I still would not probably use one as a daily driver, a Mac. I mean, I do have a Mac and I keep up with it, and it does some really cool things. I really love the concept of Shortcut and various other applications. And for music editing, it's quite nice as well, certain things. But overall, like doing coding, apparently a lot of things have been fixed in like the coding sphere. Like VS Code apparently works a lot better than when I wrote that article, which was one of the main reasons why I said what I said at the time. But there are still really odd omissions that you probably still need a Windows VM for. So I would say it's gotten better, and I think I would have a less of a problem using using a Mac right now, but I would still want my Windows machine as a virtual machine just to make sure that I can get myself out of a situation if I need to. Kudos for finding that article, though. There's a couple. People usually only find the first one I wrote, and then their second one about the sighted dev team, the blind developer, that's usually rarer. So, yeah, kudos for finding that.
I'm going to chime in if it's okay. I did assistive technology for years, but my students were sighted, but with reading based disabilities and neurodivergence. So dyslexia, ADHD, other list of alphabetic characters. But at the time, Mac was amazing and Windows was not for
Yep.
that demographic.
Absolutely true. Yeah, there's a lot of things that influence your experience, and also what you do on a Mac really matters. Mac is fantastic for dyslexic people, for example, because you can literally almost everywhere just highlight some text and right click it, and there's a speak text option right there. Like, you don't have to turn anything on for that. It's just right there. So for if you need that kind of help, it's a really great system. Just the screen reader and voiceover it feels neglected to the people who use it. It feels like bugs just aren't getting fixed fast enough and nothing is really being added to it. So like I said, some people have just started writing their own. There's a really sophisticated OCR tool for voiceover now, and there's a lot of people who write like keyboard macros for various things. So can you be productive on a Mac? Probably, provided you're given enough time and you just have enough time to get used to it. Would I personally build my workflow around it? I don't know at this point. Probably not, but I also wouldn't hate it if I were to be forced to.
For those people who don't know, OCR is optical character recognition. So if you've ever had a PDF and you've tried to make it do text-to-speech and it won't, that's just because it's an image turned into a PDF.
Yeah, so it's essentially the opposite of what OCR is. OCR can then make an image of that image and then glean the text from it again so you can read it or copy paste it. Yeah. And screen readers generally have an option to do this on a screen level. So if you have an application that just isn't accessible, but there is text on the screen, you can use that as a final resort to try to get at important information or click certain things. And Windows screen readers have had this for several years. VoiceOver has one person building like a tool that uses APIs that Apple allows you to use, and this person is brought it all the way up to having it do it every so often without you having to do anything. You can even add AI in there and ask questions to an AI about what you've just OCR'd if you want to do that. It's a whole entire thing now that VoiceOver just didn't have. So stuff's happening in that space. It's just a very interesting place right now. You wanted to say something, Marco?
Sorry, I have to click 2 buttons to unmute myself, but yeah, PDFs with images, there are some that you cannot even select test. They are horrible. PDF is a horrible format, but let's not get into that.
You can rant on that.
I can rant forever.
PDF is a mess.
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to go on another rant about how education materials that are supposed to be accessible are not provided in accessible formats.
No, I'm very lucky with the study I'm currently doing, having an online accessibility center that literally has adaptive format people that change that stuff around, but that's definitely not always the case. And when you have books you can't read and you need to prepare for a test, that is a very, 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 very bad demotivator.
Yes. I worked with K to kindergarten to 12, as well as post-grad up to post-secondary up to post-grad. And it was especially glaring in high school.
Oh yeah.
Really glaring in high school.
Particularly STEM is really egregious about it.
Yeah. So I spent 50% of a consultation meeting with the head of special ed of a major high school, big one in Toronto, where the parents were paying me to represent them to go through a whole legal process, right? With special ed. 50% of the time, teaching the head of special ed who had all the possible qualifications in the province for special ed, what optical character recognition is, and this is how you use your photocopier, and that there are alternative accessible forms of textbooks available from the textbook publishers, and this is how you order them.
Yeah, it's a whole entire thing. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing less of it in some respects because now, obviously, with Vital Source and Kindle and things being a thing, PDFs just aren't quite as prolific as they used to be. But obviously, that's depending on what system your school uses.
That was.
If they still use PDFs, then well, yeah, you're still hosed.
Yeah. Okay. So if anyone has any other questions, that'd be lovely. Thanks for listening to that little rant there about OCR.
It's a fun one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun one. Yes.
I have a small comment. You were saying about voiceover and being dyslexic and reading. That's the one single thing that I miss on Windows and on narrator or whatever is clicking, like pressing a hotkey and getting it to read whatever is selected. Like
yeah, I think in Edge you have this read to me thing that does that up to a point, but I'm not sure to what degree you can direct that. Like usually when I use that, it just starts reading the entire page, which often is not what you want because you'll get all the links and all the stuff too. But yeah, no, that's definitely true. There's no, I think you do have a magnifier, and if you turn that on, I think there's some super magic handshake you can do to make it like read what you currently have your magnifying thing over in TTS, but it's not well documented, and I don't know how you would do that.
I know the thing you were saying on Edge. It's like the reader mode. It's very good because some of the voices you can pick up are better for reading. They are not so robotic. Like
no, they're very human-like. They're like neural voices, like used with machine learning, so they're quite good. I recommend it for language immersion. Like if you have a language you're learning, you can just go to like a news articles website in that language, and you can just pick a voice for that language in the Edge read to me thing, and it'll just give you a very good listening practice right there, so you can actually listen to like voices that aren't extremely terrible TTS representations of a language. Every Dutch TTS voice I've heard so far has been like awful in different ways. I don't like any of them. They're all terrible.
So Aleski has another great question. Is it possible to use Safari with VoiceOver on Mac OS? Usually people recommend to test sites with this combination.
Yeah, don't use Chrome.
Yeah, I said on my work, I made our website accessible and I realized that Safari had a lot of bugs.
Yeah, so that's a fun one. Basically, Safari and VoiceOver is the combination that Apple itself supports. So you always want to be using that to test with VoiceOver, because if you start using things like Chrome and Firefox, there may very well be inconsistencies that show up on your website that has nothing to do with what you did. There's just really weird bugs in VoiceOver, in Chromium, and sometimes just the interaction between them that make VoiceOver say random stuff when it shouldn't, or not say certain things it should be saying, and it's just, you're going to get a very skewed view of how your website's doing if you use Chrome with VoiceOver. But if you use Safari, you're not wrong. WebKit does absolutely have bugs sometimes, and while you can report those, it's very Apple in that you just toss it into a black hole and hope it gets fixed. So yeah, even with all the bugs, I would still recommend stick with Safari and VoiceOver when you do accessibility testing. It's just a more consistent experience.
And when I go to accessibility events here in Toronto and hang out with my blind, low vision friends and colleagues. By and large, everyone has a Apple phone, an iPhone, and they're using Safari to look up things.
Yeah, Safari on the iPhone. In the EU, you now have the option to use different browsers as of like a few months ago, because the EU made Apple do that. Basically, they forced their hand into it. But yeah, it's still going to be Safari all the way down for most people. So that's just this most common use pattern.
Yeah. So basically, test on Safari for mobile.
Yeah, on Mac OS too.
Yes. If we don't have any other questions, this is probably a good time to. Oh, we do. Oh, good one. That was quick. Okay. Oh, hello. I'm 18, and until a few months ago, I had pretty decent vision, so I never learned to use a screen reader or accessibility in general. But in the recent months, my vision is deteriorating rapidly. So I'm trying to learn VoiceOver, but I haven't found many useful resources online. Can you point me to some online resources?
There's two I can point you at. One is the tutorial built into VoiceOver. I believe it's VoiceOver Command F8 or just VoiceOver F8 to trigger that, and it would have probably already come up the first time you started it, but that's one thing I would recommend you do. Another website I would recommend you take a look at is applevis.com. So it's Apple and then VIS for vision.com. That'll have all the iPhone, Apple Watch, Mac, and iPad OS resources you could ever want and more. So that is where I would recommend you take a look. And they have getting started articles and various other things and tricks of the trade. They have accessible app directories and things. So that might be a good thing to look at that in that situation.
I popped the link to that one, appleviz.com/guide/beginner's guide using Mac OS VoiceOver.
Yeah, very good. They were recently they were going to like drop off the face of the earth, and then were acquired by Be My Eyes. So they are now in collaboration with them. Be My Eyes is this software platform that lets volunteers help visually impaired people with things by looking for their camera.
So it's like, where is everything in my cupboard?
Yeah, or just I've asked them like, what the hell is this BIOS error that I can't read showing on the screen, so I can go Google it, or things of that nature. Sometimes it's really fun because my stuff is in Dutch. Sometimes I can't stand it when it's in Dutch, but sometimes when I fall so far down the userland rabbit hole where it just sort of reverts back to factory defaults, it will be in Dutch because this is where I bought it. And I've had volunteers like, yeah, it's all in Dutch. Like, I'm really sorry.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that can happen. That's the whole entire song and dance. If I have to do something in the UEFI or the BIOS here, I literally have to rearrange my entire room because I have to hook up a monitor. I don't have one connected right now. I have to make sure that the monitor is visible from the camera I'm using. I have to make sure that everything is working. It's a whole entire thing.
Oh, wow. I'm going to ask Pranav a question. Are you in Canada or not? Or where are you? If you can type.
No, I'm from India.
You're from okay, and you're in India too. Okay. Then that works.
Why do I have a question about regulations or something?
No. He was just saying that he was having deteriorating vision, because my mom has been involved with the Canadian National Institute.
Oh, yeah.
The Royal National Institute for the Blind, and in the U.S., like I was going to give resources if there's any one of those.
I don't actually know what India is doing in that sense. I know they have some programs, but it's just not my area.
Yeah.
Also, you're up late, friend.
Yes.
Yeah, it's 5 a.m. here.
I was about to say, it's stupid o'clock over there. What are you doing up? Like, I am doing this at 1 in the morning, and I'm already calling myself crazy. So.
Thank you. So I'm going to start at count to 10 and see if anyone else says yes, if they've got in the chat, if they've got another question. And if not, then we'll wrap it up and we'll let Florian go to bed. Oh my gosh, such good sound effects. Okay. Thank you, everyone in Florida. Thank you around the world. I will let people know we have The Accessibility for Dev series is on the third Monday of every month. It's going completely online for the rest of 2024. Sort of taking the opportunity after being assaulted to make it more accessible for people to attend from all around the world. So doing that.
Okay, yeah, sounds great.
I don't have to figure out a location and if it's accessible because I've got a lot to do. Right. So anyway, thank you so much. Next month we've got an incredible one. I haven't done the announcement yet, but it's accessible forums and it's someone who's a complete rock star in accessibility. So
Hint, it's not me.
no, but you can come and there's cat themed stuff. So
Ooh,
yes,
nice.
we always got to have the pets. There have been no cats interrupting us today. This is the first event ever. I have 3. Thank you. And have a lovely afternoon, evening, or morning.
Sounds great. You guys have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
You too. Bye bye.